Great. Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello to everyone tuning in live on Facebook, and welcome to everyone viewing the replay here or on YouTube. I'm Latricia Friend, a member of the Corona Days Professional Development Group. Thank you for joining me in a conversation with Michael Padurano and Jen Zahari. A little bit about them both. Michael is known as the Connected Consultant. His mission, to elevate humanity through knowledge and understanding. Jen pulls from her own experiences for the impact of mental and emotional wellness in the workplace. I normally recommend people buckle up for a conversation like this, but for this one, maybe you want to be looser, a little freer to be open to the possibilities. Our conversation is the power of vulnerability when helping others.
All right.
Mike?
We're an upside down pyramid. I love it.
Thank you,
There we
Latricia.
go. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Both of you, Danette, with Latricia, and Jen, thank you for agreeing me to put you into the fire.
Always.
So for me, the power of vulnerability for me, right? Like it's something that I've learned over the past year. I've spoken in this group. I think this is my third time now. So one of the things I've learned about myself through this past year is that one of my superpowers is vulnerability, and through that, I create safe spaces for others to be vulnerable. And another great point of Jen being here is she's somebody that I've done that for. So it's creating space for others to be themselves, be comfortable within their own skin. Hey, Rhonda.
Good morning, Rhonda.
And I'm not somebody who's ever been comfortable in my own skin. I still struggle with it many days, and I still probably have partial imposter syndrome. I probably still, have self-doubt, self-worries, those things. But it's a daily practice for me. It's something that I actively work on changing. I've always been a people pleaser. I always try to fit into other people's boxes, and I always have a way of hiding parts of myself. And because I'm scared, right? When there's a dynamic that changes in any type of relationship, partnership, business, whatever it is, familyship, that when that dynamic changes, you don't always know what the reaction is going to be. And sometimes it creates this situation to where you tiptoe a little bit. Jen, why don't you give a little bit of your story, because your story is so powerful and magical that you had to be here. You didn't really have a choice. I was going to force you.
Yeah, right. Well, first I just want to recognize Candace. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm gonna start with why vulnerability is so important to me, and then I'll dial back, Michael, if you don't mind, and touch back on my story. Guys, I can tell you that for me, being vulnerable has come in the form of just being me. I look to my life, and I'm 44 years old, and I look to my life, and the struggles that I've had have stemmed from me showing up in a way that I thought people wanted to see me, instead of showing up in a way that I was just authentic to me. And to me, that is the best form of vulnerability, is just being ourselves, even though sometimes it may be scary and sometimes it may be whatever for you. So backing way up to Mike's point about my story, my story started when I was very young. The story for me was around 3 or 4 that started the disempowerment, and it came in the form of someone very important to me that often said, thank you, Facebook user, for the comment. It came in the form of comments that stemmed basically the story of something like your voice doesn't matter, and other comments like that. And I can tell you, as a very young, very impressionable young girl, I built that story to say, oh, your voice doesn't matter. Be really careful. Be cautious of what you say. Watch what you say. Watch what you do. Not sure how people are going to receive it. And the dichotomy for me is I am a very strong person, and there's a lot that I wanted to bring to life. So me bringing me life internally, externally strong, and internally came a lot of anxiety and a lot of second guessing and building year over year, moment over moment on that story. My breaking point was I was 37 years old. It'll be 8 years in February that I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And you guys, I really believe in that story of me internally second guessing over and over and over again of what I was saying to people showed up as dis-ease in my throat as cancer. And I can tell you that was my pivot. That was my life's pivot to say, okay, something's got to change. I just want to be me, and I want to be able to show up and be myself and be comfortable with that. And that's been my roller coaster in a really beautiful way over the last 8 years. And it's been the most amazing experience, just being able to show up and say, this is me all the way, and not have the anxiety or stigma behind it.
And it's funny, right? Because as open as I am, as vulnerable as I am, as much as I'm there for others, I still have my moments where I am terrified of myself.
Oh,
I
yeah.
still have my moments that I look in the mirror and I just don't know what to do at that moment, right? And it's getting clearer every day, and everybody has good days, bad days. You know, the trick that I'm learning to all this is, no matter where you're at that moment, share that with who's around you, right? Share that with your circle. Create a circle of people that understand that everyone has bad days. They don't judge you. They allow you to be you. They help you allow you to be yourself, right? There's so much power to allowing. And it's something I'm still not good at. I'm really not, but I work on it daily. But that's the real power, is admitting that you're not there and admitting that you're still working on it, right? There's nothing wrong with being a work in progress. There's nothing wrong with moving in a general direction. You know, I work with many people in many different ways globally. I help people. I lend hand. I inspire. I motivate. I lift them up. I carry them sometimes. And sometimes, you know, I need people to do that for me, right? And I'm okay with that today. I used to think that I was a burden. I used to think that I was going to be a problem to others. You know, it's great that I can do it for everybody else, but you know, if I show anybody else that I need it, you know, then I'm less than, right? I'm losing value, and I'm not really worth it to anybody.
Right.
And what's ironic? Well, go ahead, Jen. You go real quick.
Well, I was just going to mention, I'm an empowerment coach, and one of the things that I say often, and I've been backing up from that, I've been in the staffing and recruiting industry for 15 years. I'll come back to that. Let me read this. Yeah, thank you for that, Rhonda. It is powerful when we can just be happy being us. So thank you for sharing that. It is very powerful. So one of the things that I share with everybody is, where is there? Because there is no there. We're all on this journey. I can tell you that year over year, moment over moment, I've had the epiphany so many times to say, oh my gosh, I've grown so much in the last year. And then the next year will come and I'll say the same thing. Wow, I've grown so much over the last year. And I think that's the power in it all, is just the continuous progress to we learn and we grow, and then we keep learning and we keep growing. But Mike, I agree, you know, some days are just bad days. And one of the things that admittedly over the last year and a half has been the first time I really learned how to grieve. You know, my dad passed 14 years ago, and he's my best friend. And I can tell you that in even that, and even just being able to feel feelings and just say, wow, I'm just going to feel this and let it come and receive it. You can also let it go quicker, as opposed to shoving it down. And to your point, even about just having a support system of people to call and preferable sit in it with you,
Right.
and just feel the feelings with you, and you don't have to go in it alone.
There's power to letting people in, right? There's power to when you're good, when you're bad, when you're just whatever, when you're average, right? When you're just having a blah day, right? And those days happen too. It doesn't make you less than to open up and just share where you're at. It doesn't mean that you're not a positive person if you're having a bad day.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're not an optimistic person if you're having a bad day. It just means you're having a bad day.
Agreed.
You know, And there's so many pieces of life that, I'm still learning on a daily basis, because as I'm coming into my own skin and I'm becoming more confident in myself and I'm creating my own value and I'm feeling my value, there's times that I still hide that from people because I'm scared I won't be accepted for now changing that dynamic, right? Like I'm scared to show that I'm confident. I'm scared to show that I know my value, right? Because if I do, that dynamic's going to change, and I don't know how I'm going to react to that dynamic changing, right?
Right.
So I feel like there's this big paradigm that we constantly live in, is how do we change while also still fitting into the roles that we're in today? And I think the reality is we can't worry about those roles. We have to just be us and be
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
And that's not easy to do. I mean, I've just had a conversation this morning with someone about it. I've been hiding how confident I've become. I've been hiding how,
Yeah.
much value I feel in myself these days. And it's not in an egotistical way at all,
Right.
but I just see my value, right? And I'm so in the used to a pattern of being in a certain dynamic in that with that individual or person, that I'm scared to share that. But this morning I made that leap and decided to share it because I can't stop being me anymore. And I
Right.
can't hold myself back with fear of a dynamic shift. A lot of the work that I did, the Brene Brown work, a lot of the trigger therapy, trauma therapy that I did with Sherry Lewick, the gratitudes and stuff that I learned from Annie Lee, and all these different pieces over time. And I learned something every day from everyone.
Right.
It's not one way of doing it. It's all the different pieces.
Right.
It's all the different ways and finding and building your own system that works for you. Jen's unique gift is that she can see how to empower somebody else by looking at who they are. And she can see in you what you don't see in yourself. And I have that similar gift. She's in a different place and shares it in a different way. And that's what makes us individual, right? That's the reason that we need to share our stories, so
Right.
that we relate to the people that can relate to us, and we can help the ones that relate to us.
Right.
Because we can't help everyone. We can't be there for everyone. It's just
Right.
impossible.
Right. And I think that as individuals, you said it perfectly, like we're all always growing. And I think the gift in that is, as we grow and as we get better and we get stronger, and our values may shift slightly as we grow. If we're being real and authentic with us and our growth with the people around us, they grow too. And if we're holding ourselves back in the growth that we're having or who we are, we're inadvertently holding other people back as well. So
Yeah, and I think part of it is we can't be scared to lose people.
agreed.
We have to hope that we can inspire them,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's difficult to differentiate sometimes, because when you're so close to somebody and you have a bond with somebody, and there's a specific dynamic that's been put in play in a different way. Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm
Candace.
always,
Yeah.
yeah. Every once in a while, I have a moment of clarity that something comes out that I didn't even realize I said. I really was gonna ask who quoted that, but that's fine. I'm pretty sure it was me. But like, we get used to being in dynamics, right? And the reality is dynamics always shift and
Right.
dynamics always change.
Right.
Life happens,
Right.
and when life happens, dynamics shift.
Right.
And how do you explain to people about dynamics and shifting and being adaptable to the constant change, right? I mean, if 2020 taught us anything, we need to be adaptable to change.
Yes. The thing that I dial back to often is, who do you want to be and how do you want to show up? And let that be your guiding force of who you want to be in life, who you want to be for other people. And in all the things that we're faced with, just know that tomorrow's always another day, especially with 2020 and all the things that have come along with it. Is, if we're number one, true to here's who I want to be, here's who I want to show up for myself, here's who I want to show up for other people, here's my core values. And then we lead with that. And when things come with it, come at us, we answer that with being who we are, I think it's easier for me anyway. And it's easier to deal with the hard things because you know exactly who you are and how you want to deal with it.
But again, I think there's a lot of work to find out who we are, right?
Oh,
And
agreed.
and that's where I think people need the guidance, right? That's where they
Mhm.
reach out to somebody like you and learn to figure out who they really are, right?
Right.
Because we've played roles. We can talk about my divorce transition. We can talk about my sobriety. We can talk, like, I've played a million roles in my life, right? And I've always tried to be the role that I needed to be at that moment for that person.
Right.
What I'm learning today is I can still just be me and fill those roles without having to change who I'm perceived to be.
Right.
And that's challenging at times. So when you talk to people and when somebody comes to you and says, I don't even know who I am anymore, how do you break that down?
Yeah, really good question. I tend to go based on 8 key life factors and just saying, okay, in the area of family, what's important to you? In the area of family, what do you want? In the area of family, what would mean the most to you 5 years from now? And same for career, and same for finances, and same for um, emotions, and same for career and growth and life. And if you break down every part of life and say, who do you want to be in each one of these areas, you get closer to who you really are. And the other thing I tend to challenge people on is if you're writing something down that it feels inauthentic, it feels like it's not who you are, question that. Is that really what you want? Are you doing this for someone else, or are you doing this for yourself?
Yeah, and for me, I'm empathic, right? So like I've always questioned my motives at times, right? Like, am I just feeling what that person wants and filling that role because I know that's what they want,
Right.
or am I doing it for me? And up until recent times, it's been very challenging for me to disseminate the difference.
Right.
Um, and the more I come into my own, and the more I understand myself, and the more I feel free to be myself, because I'm still not fully free. I still don't feel fully free yet. I'm working towards it. It's a daily progress.
Yeah.
And there's still people in my life that I don't feel free to be myself in every way.
Yeah.
Like there's different people play different roles, and in those roles, I allow that piece of me out. So,
I think apologize to interrupt, Mike.
mm,
I think we all have those moments, though. For me, and you know this, our audience doesn't know this, they're going to know now. For me, when we go outside the comfort zones, we may be a little bit off ourselves. I can tell you, being live on anything, it sets me outside of my comfort zone. It's a vulnerability for me. That voice, it's one of those that I'm working to build, because whatever it makes us off kilter at times, I think. And it doesn't mean we're not being true to us. It just means that we're pushing outside of our comfort zone, and it's a new lesson, and we're pushing the thermometer. And then once we get through that, we're going to be even stronger and be even freer, to your point. But I still come back, even at the freeness, I come back to what is free, because 10 years from now, I'll still probably be saying I still have more room to grow, and I can push the thermometer even higher. I
for
would assert.
me, for me, when I talk about freedom, it's personal freedom, freedom of self.
Okay.
It's not freedom of any outside circumstance, because I cannot control outside circumstances. I'm finally starting to understand
Agreed.
that.
Agreed.
Still not completely allowing and accepting it, but I do understand it very
Right.
well. Um, Working on the other two. But like when I think of it, I think of personal freedom. I am finally free to just be myself and sit with me. Now, my goal is to be that to the world,
Right.
right? And everyone that in my life and everyone outside of it. And that's where I'm still trying to navigate how I do it, because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to, ruin relationships that I've had my whole life. But there's gonna be people. There's gonna be times that people don't fit anymore.
Right.
And I don't know how to handle that. I don't know how to, you know, I can, you know, give opportunities. I can reach out. I can, put things on a silver platter for people. But if they don't follow through, I refuse to carry that weight for them anymore. You know, I used to try and do things for people. I used to try and get them to a place for them.
Right.
But one thing I've learned is I've had to become hands off with that because I need to do that for myself.
Right.
And then what I can do is inspire through that. And that's really what I'm hoping to be and do for others. And that's what I try to do on a daily basis. You know, I have people that I speak to around the world on a daily basis. They all come from different walks of life. They all have different circumstances, all have different situations. And what I do is really unique. Like what I do is a lot of times not quantifiable. And a lot of times there's no financial value for it because in some ways it's priceless, right?
Mhm.
And in some ways, how do you commoditize that?
Right. Well, and that's the thing though. Okay. So when I look at what you do and what I do, right? And I look at my healing journey, to me, the healing journey, for me anyway, has come in two main forms. It's come on the emotional side, the spiritual side, and it's come on the psychological neural pathway side. I work, of course, mindset wise on the neural pathways and changing your neural pathways and making sure that you're talking to yourself the right way. You know what the right plan is you want for your life. You know where you want to go. You have the right structure behind it. You're saying the right things. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but you work more on the emotional, spiritual side of, okay, are we letting the traumas of the past go from our cellular function? Are we letting the past stories go from our spirituality? Are we getting closer to just being in line to everything of who we want to be and a higher power? Pretty accurate statement.
I mean, I probably lean spiritual then emotional, but yes, I mean, it's definitely that side of the side
Right.
of the spectrum first, right? And mentally, I don't think I can speak on that because I'm still working on it, right? Like I'm still, you know, like I sit here still rubbing my fingers, right? Because I don't know what to do with myself right now. My hands are, I'm not holding the phone anymore, and that's what I've done for months on live. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to not fidget. I'm trying to just be. I'm trying not to let my critic, my inner critic, my judge, my all these things bother me right now. Because as much as I'm live, I'm still not 100% comfortable. I'm still not 100% comfortable talking about my vulnerable spaces, right? Because this is true vulnerability. This is the power of it. It's I'm outside of my comfort zone, admitting to everyone that
Yeah.
I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm okay saying
Right.
and that's not easy to do, right? Like that's another step beyond the uncomfortableness of going live. Like it's also the content that you're putting out there when you're live. I mean, I was live for 4 hours last night on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm live pretty much 5 to 6 times a week, and this is different because this is a more intimate, personal, self-awareness conversation, right? Because as I'm expressing to everybody watching, I'm also learning about myself.
Right.
Because when you put it out there, sometimes you're a little further along than you think you are, and sometimes you're a little less further along than you think you are, right? And you just don't know which side you're on.
Right.
But I definitely focus on the spiritual side and then emotional side, and then probably point somebody to a mental side because I'm just kind of mental, you know. But
Yeah.
yes, I mean the way that you do it and the way that you empower, but see, what I find unique about the way that you do it is you actually go emotional and
I
mental
do.
at the same time. At the same time, the neural pathways at the same time.
I do.
Like you hit both at the same time because that's where you've come from.
I agree, Rhonda. Yes.
Well, I'll send you my Venmo, Ronnie. You can figure out a price that's priceless, and we'll go from there. I'm kidding. No, but like it's one of those things, right? Like because of your personal journey,
Yeah.
you can't ignore the emotional side of it, but you
Right.
also can't ignore the mental side that you went through also.
Right.
And that's where your balance is. My balance is really spiritual, emotional. Yours is neural pathways emotional, which you're also filling in your spiritual as you're building your emotional.
True. Very
So
true.
it's different, right? It's a different paradigm of it. And you know, I think everybody needs something different at a different time, right?
Right.
It's all about the relatability again. You need to resonate with who you work with.
Right.
You
Agreed.
know, there's a reason that I've been able to help Rhonda. There's a reason that, you know, in some ways I've helped you and you helped me. because we resonate, we relate, there's something there, there's a bond, right?
Yeah.
And it's that's real. Like that stuff is real, and it's intangible. And it's priceless also. And you got to kind of just roll with it, right? So when you're looking at the neural pathways, can you explain that a little bit more?
Neural pathways, what they are, how they work.
Well, how they work and how you redo it, because I think that's powerful, and I think that's something that people need to understand and maybe can learn.
Okay. So if you're not familiar, neural pathways, and I'm going to talk in gen terms, the way I describe it, but your neural pathways are basically in your brain. Those are all of the maps, quote unquote, that you've built in your brain of where everything goes. It's like, for example, taking me for example, my map and my neural pathway used to say your voice doesn't matter. Be careful of what you say. Your people are going to judge you. You're an embarrassment. That was my map. That was my neural pathways. And essentially, I needed to cut those neural pathways off and make a different story. And that's where first I work to dial all the way back to that littlest story and build a new one. I use some different approaches with visualizations and meditations for and with people to help them rebuild their story. And we can get into that later. That's a good way. When we for ourselves can tell ourselves a new story, it's more powerful for our brain, because our brain is rebuilding it based on our voice, and then it's more believable. So that's the first starter point. And then it's a matter of saying, okay, what are my trigger words? What are the negative go-to words I usually go to when I'm going down the tunnel of disempowerment and the tunnel of not being kind to myself? What are those words I use? And I have my teams define it and say, what are those? And then what is going to be your new phrase? What are you going to put in there instead? What is going to be your new affirmation? So instead of saying my voice doesn't matter, my voice is strong and powerful. And starting to rewrite that story. So every time that trigger shows up, you're immediately rephrasing it in your brain and starting to rebuild that neural pathway. The other thing that I learned, and this one actually came from John Assaraf, and he's phenomenal. Putting yourself in the state of an empowering moment you had will actually change your brain chemistry, so that when you introduce an affirmative statement, it's more believable for your neural pathways. Whereas at times, if you're already in a disempowered state and you try to tell yourself, I'm strong, but your brain's saying, no, you're not. If you instead change your brain chemistry first and then introduce the affirmations, then those neural pathways can get stronger. And it also comes with a lot of journaling. I do a lot of mirror work, and I recommend a lot of mirror work for people. Just looking yourself in the mirror and being honest and being kind to yourself is important. Those are my biggest structures for that.
I'm not big on mirrors, but we can roll with that. The affirmation thing is powerful, but like you said, I think part of it is being aware of the triggers, right? Like you've got to recognize them first. And for me, it's always been quicksand. I've always visualized quicksand, that when not a tunnel, but like literally I'm in quicksand. Like the minute I head down that dark road and I start feeling like the world is suffocating me, I immediately start visualizing I'm in quicksand. And no matter what I do, it just gets worse. And I think that's why, over time I've learned that just sitting with it helps me, because the only way to not get killed in quicksand is not to move, right? So for me, just sit with it really makes sense. But I find that there's a bigger piece to this puzzle for me, and it's not only the triggers, but it's the body, the cell memorization, the whole, like everything that my body felt at those moments as well.
Yeah.
Like once I recognized the triggers, then I also noticed that my body had reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And just because now I know the triggers doesn't mean I realize that those body reactions were sort of the same way. And now what I've learned is that's my intuition, right? My intuition is telling me, something's off.
Right.
And leaning into your intuition is very difficult. We all have it. We always second guess it. But being able to stand up and actually lean into your intuition is extremely empowering, and it's extremely powerful. And maybe that's how I deal with the mental side of it, is by really pushing my intuition.
Right.
Because what you said seems like a lot of work. So I think I just shortcutted it all.
Love it. You said an important piece that reminded me, so thank you. One of the things that I often say is that still a story I want to own? We have a choice. We have a choice to just ask, do we want to still own that story? Yes, Rhonda, I 100% agree with that statement.
So owning the story, how does that work for you? Give a little example so that people can make it relatable. Let's showcase your skill set.
Okay.
Mine's intangible, so we can't. So let's just work with yours.
So owning the story. Here's a story. My story, you guys, for a lot of years is I'm an introvert. I labeled myself as an introvert. I labeled myself as someone who just didn't belong in front of people. I didn't belong on stage. I didn't belong talking to people. I was an introvert. And I was in sales. So I labeled myself as an introverted salesperson. And I was really good. I'm really good at it. That has been my shift, is I'm really not an introvert. Not that there's good or bad, and there's both. They're both great. That label that I had put on myself was, Jen, is that really how you want to define yourself? Do you want to define yourself as someone who just doesn't belong on video? I'm like, no, that's not a story I want to own anymore. I want to own a story that says I love being on live video, and that I love talking in this context and helping support other people and showing up and making an impact on groups. And guys, that for me has been a story. It literally has been a decades, 30 years, 40 years of a story that I've been working to break. Is that story of I don't belong on stage and I don't belong helping people. And that's been a story for me I've been shifting for years. And I'm so grateful. And Michael's been a great part of that journey, especially over the last several months, telling myself that new story that I do belong sharing my story, and I do belong being on stage, and I do belong being on live events and talking to people. There's power in just that, and just what I say to myself when that little voice comes in and says, Jen, you don't belong on stage, instantly I'm like, yeah, I'm not owning that anymore. And we're not listening to that voice anymore.
So how, that's a big transition, but you've been working on it for a long time. But
can we pause for 1 minute, Michael? I just want to look at Rhonda's newest comment. Thank you. Yes.
No.
Yes. Yeah. Rhonda, can you pull it? Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Rhonda, I agree with that comment. And can we just talk about labels for a minute? Because I don't love labels, period. I think that every one of us are such beautiful individuals exactly as we are. And I love quiet time. I love giving my space. I also love talking to people and being in front of people. And I think that we as a society, and I'm going to go on a bit of a soapbox and tangent for a minute, but as a society, I think we label people and put them in funnels and put them in boxes. And then as people, and especially our kids, and then it brings all the way through, they're labeled as I'm not this, or I am this, and I'm to this, and I'm not enough of this. And we need a break. For me, I call everybody out. If I hear you label yourself, I'm going to call you out on it and say, is that really what you want to own? Because it's a choice. And so anyway.
No, and I agree, and you know that labelism is to me is the creator of all isms, right? Because it desensitizes us to division and breaking people up by differences.
Right.
You know, I think that we're one race, we're the human race, in case anybody didn't notice yet. And at the end of the day, we need to embrace and cherish and honor our unique differences.
Right.
Because that's what makes us special, right? That's what makes us unique.
Right.
That's how we have diversity. That's how we can bring all parties to the table to have open, honest, vulnerable conversations, right? And but it needs to be created in a safe space. And as long as there's labels and as long as there's divisive natures, it's very difficult to do that, right? Like you can do it on a small scale, right? And then as I've learned in Ubuntu and all this other stuff that they did in South Africa in the 90s, Mandela came out and united people and, you know, all this crazy stuff that they did, like it was all based on Ubuntu. And it's great in theory, but how do we actually elevate ourselves to be? How do we raise our vibration to remove societal norms and societal teachings our whole life to be able to be raw, to be vulnerable, and bring our truth to the table?
Right.
And that's difficult at times.
Right. Well, and being accepting that we can all sit at the table and have different opinions. We can all have different perspectives and all be right on our perspectives. We don't have to agree with one another all the time, and we can be respectful and kind of those differences.
It's and that's what needs to happen, right?
Yeah, it is.
It needs. It doesn't always happen. It can happen in small groups, and people do that in small groups. And I think more people need to be vulnerable. More people need to be real. More people need to be comfortable in their own skin.
Right.
And the power of vulnerability, which is apparently the topic. Somebody came up with that. I think it was me. But apparently the power of vulnerability is the power to be able to unite people around the world through that.
Right.
If people sat down and shared their vulnerability,
right.
It would break those borders, those walls that we've created. I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah.
So, what else do you want to add to the vulnerability and what you do and how your vulnerability plays a role in it? Like how, when you're using it to help people, like when you're helping people, do you lean in with your vulnerability? I mean, is that your relatable piece? Is that what you do?
100%. Everyone that I work with sees 100% of me, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, to me, it's the only way to be. And again, I've been working with people in the staffing industry for 15 years, and when you're real with someone, they're real back. They can be real back, and I want people to be real with me, and I want people to be able to be themselves and know they're not going to be judged, and just know that they can openly say what they really want in life and be heard and be guided in that direction without the judgment and without feeling like they have to do a certain thing for anyone. They can just do what they want to do for them. And to me, I allow people to do that by showing up that way for them.
So again, it's that allowing thing. I'm working on allowing. Allowing is difficult sometimes. For me, it's easy to be vulnerable. It's easy to hold a safe space. It's easy to bring people together. It's easy to have difficult, lengthy, deep conversations. But for me to allow people to potentially make their own mistakes, for me to allow people to fall on their face if they need to, or for me to allow people to follow their journey sometimes, it really, sometimes I take it personally. I do, and I think that it's a control issue because my abuse as a child and whatever else I went through, right? So I think it created that I want to control my environment today because it's kind of like a safety net for me.
Yeah.
But I'm working on it, and allowing is so important, and I'm getting really good at it in 99% of my life. The 1%, I'm a little bit of an overthinker, as everybody in the group probably knows by now. So it really pushes me sometimes into spirals, and it's hard at times. Like, I've got to have self-compassion, I've got to have self-forgiveness, and I've really got to take that space for myself, and I've got to hold space for myself, which is another thing I'm not great at. I'm great at holding for everybody else, but I'm getting there. And the power of vulnerability is you can be anything you need to be, anyone you want to be, anyone you desire to be. You can inspire others to do that for themselves,
Right.
with those that they care about, and
Right.
that's the power of vulnerability. That's what really it comes down to. And it also helps me be my truest, most authentic self.
Right.
Live within my core values.
Right. I agree with all of that, Mike. Can we pull up Brenda's newest comment?
I love Rhonda.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So I want to say something real
Yep.
fast.
Yep.
It's not my place to figure out who's deserving and who's not.
I
I
agree
can't
with that.
control how they accept it.
Right.
But I can control how I react and how I give it. I've made a decision in my life to give unconditional love to everyone. Yeah, but I don't believe that either. I don't believe that either, Rhonda, because if I stop letting in people that hurt me, then I'm going to stop letting everybody in at some point. And it's going to shut me down, and it's going to create walls, and I'm not going to be my truest, most authentic self. What I need to do is stop allowing that hurt to control me. And I need to allow the hurt so that I can learn the lessons from it.
To me, my favorite phrase on that is hurt people hurt people. And often that hurt just, guys, again, I work with a lot of people who just are going through tough situations, tough life situations in so many different aspects, and sometimes people just need to vent it and get it off their chest and have someone hold on to that for them. Have someone hold all that hurt. And one of the things that I've learned and has been super powerful is even just saying the simple thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for allowing, because when hurt people, and this was recently brought into my space, when someone who's hurting shares with you, they're actually being very vulnerable. They're putting themselves in a vulnerable situation to say, I'm hurting right now. It's coming out in anger. It's coming out in frustration. It's probably coming out towards you, but it's not about you. And if we can work to respond in a way to say, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that must have been hard. And then decide, depending on the conversation, how to take it from there. It can actually open that person up to finally let it go and maybe start working on their own anger and maybe start understanding that that they may have things to work on. Hurt people. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we do have to stay away from hurt people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a line, right? Like, I
Agreed.
think that, okay, so for me, I don't know how to say this, but like, I don't know the right way to say this, but for me, I don't like not giving people a chance. I believe that people deserve a chance, but I do have limits, right? And
Right.
and to me, that comes down to intention. What's their
Right.
intention?
Right.
If somebody is hurting and they hurt me, again, it's exactly what I'm saying is, I think it goes to
Yeah.
intention, Rhonda. If they're not doing it to specifically hurt me, then I kind of want to be there as a guiding force to help them find their way back, or when they're ready to find their way back. I just don't let them as close.
Right.
Right. Toxic people is different, right? Because then you're talking about the intent is different. Again, it goes back to intent, and I have to follow my intuition on really what the true intent is.
Yeah.
There are people in my life that I've been hurt from that I keep in my life. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good part of it too. But again, it comes to why would I wish that upon anybody? I
Yeah.
don't. I can't live wishing that it's going to come back to them, right? I can't. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
So what I do is I focus on me, and as long as their intent is not to go out to hurt me, then I can't hold it against them. Look, we're all on our own paths. We're all healing in our own ways. We all have to take our own journeys. And maybe sometimes if they're hurting me, it's because I'm not allowing them to take their own journey.
Yeah.
I don't think people mean to hurt others. I think it's inadvertent. And sometimes people get selfish. Sometimes people get scared. Sometimes people are insecure. Sometimes people just don't know and they're listening to the wrong people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the reality too.
Yeah. There's so much on this one. First and foremost, I think we're all in agreement. None of us would condone any type of hurtful, harmful behavior towards anyone. None of us would condone that behavior. Um, right. You're exactly right. Sometimes we're not whole enough to allow hurt people in our space. But I also believe that, Mike, to your point, when sometimes someone's hurting, it has nothing to do with you. They're not hurting you. And that gives us a chance who are strong enough to be in their space and see if there's some type of offering that we can have to get to help them in some way, shape, or form. And also in this entire conversation, from my perspective, sometimes two people are just not made to connect. And sometimes it doesn't make either one right or wrong. And sometimes they're hurting each other and it doesn't make either one right or wrong. It just means that those two people, personality wise, are not maybe made to connect in some way. And for me, what I've learned and I teach it, I learn it, I believe it. The way I look at it is every person in our world brings us different emotional space, right? And when I've been going through my journey, I love every person in my world, and I mean that. They all know it. I love all of my family in my world. They all know it. And there's some that I have disconnected from. I love them to pieces. I will send good wishes on occasion, but I know that they're not a person that for my own emotional well-being, it's just not a connect we're going to have on a frequent basis. And there are others who, and Mike, you made this point as well, there are others who, in me lifting and in me growing, they inadvertently lifted and grow. And in some situations, very candidly, there are people in my life who other people would have considered toxic in at times. But again, in me lifting, the people around me lifted, and there's no toxicity there. So I really think this one comes to perspectives. Again, not in any way, shape, or form condoning any type of anyone hurting anyone, because I believe in true love and just everyone getting along in a happy world, in a good world. So
Well, I think there's another part of this, right? Like
yeah,
we have to keep in mind that everybody's a reflection of us,
it's true.
right? And
Very true.
maybe if they're toxic to us, that we're learning something from that experience.
Truth.
Maybe
Very
we're
true.
toxic to others in the same way,
Yep.
and we don't realize it, right?
Yep.
And I really believe that anything that comes our way, we're meant to learn from.
Agreed.
And good, bad, indifferent, no matter what it is, my mother dying, my aunt dying, all these different things, right? Like these things, a couple friends died when I was younger. Like, I mean, these aren't great experiences. But I learned from it, and I learned a lot from it, right?
Yeah.
Like when my mother was dying at the end, everybody wanted to keep her going as long as possible, and I was trying to fight for her to let her go. And there was a learning experience there. There was an experience to learn from, watching how sometimes people want to be selfish for their own attachments over what's best for the person that wants to let go. And that was a learning experience, and it wasn't a good one. Trust me, it wasn't a good one. And you know, my soon-to-be ex-wife is going to be another learning experience. Wasn't a great one, but I got my kids out of it. And I couldn't imagine living without them. You know, and even today, people that I'm hurt by, it's also a reflection of something that I'm doing, and I have to be understanding that also. And then human ego comes into play sometimes, where, well, they're doing this to me, and I don't want to look at what I'm doing, right? And that's where that ego comes in, and it's like, ooh, I'm above this. No,
Yeah.
you're not. No, we're not. Like, we're really not. We're
Nope.
we're really petty. I promise you, we are. Um,
Yep.
but we got to look at that within ourselves. We've got to be willing to look at our own darkness, to go through our own darkness, to find our own light.
Right.
You know, and there is no perfection. There is no perfect way to do this or live or be around those you care about. It's
Yeah.
you've got to value the interactions.
Right.
You've got to even take gratitude in the lessons, because the lessons are so valuable.
Right. The comment I heard at one point was, "You can only see what you are," and I think that there's a lot of truth behind that.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Rhonda.
that's really true, Rhonda. And if we look at it as we can only see what we are, when we see fault, when we judge, or when we see faults in other people, we should look at ourselves and say, how am I doing that? Or how am I that? And it really, for me at least, it's changed my perspective on people over the decades. Of when I look at it as I can only see who I am, then I really question that, am I being authentic to my truths and my values and who I want to be and show up in the world?
And as another note, Jen is the youngest elder I've ever met in my life. She's wise way beyond her years. You know, it's again, we're all here on this journey, and it's called life. We're all here on this experience, and we need to start being comfortable in our own skin to
Yeah.
be vulnerable.
Yeah.
We need to really live in our vulnerability, because that will make society flourish.
Agreed.
That will unite people, right?
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that people that you start off with are going to be the same people at the end after you start being vulnerable on how you feel about things.
Yeah.
But what it means is the people that are attracted to you or come to you, or the universe sends you, are going to be people that accept you as you are.
Right.
And they're already going to be in your corner, and
Right.
you're going to be in theirs.
Yeah.
And it's just a different dynamic. It just is.
It makes life freer.
It does.
When you know you can just be yourself around people, and the people who love you exactly as you are going to stay close, and the ones who don't, they're just meant for a different group. It's just not good or bad. It's just, it is. Yeah.
Well, I think that's good. I think. Thank you. I don't know what to say about that one, but thank you, Rhonda. I love you. I appreciate you. Getting better at accepting compliments, so that's good. I'm closer. I'm closer to almost just being okay with it. I think that's it, though. I mean, I don't have anything else to touch on, I think, right this second. I think we did a pretty fluid job of covering a million topics under the umbrella of vulnerability. I did blush. Okay. Fantastic.
I agree with you, Mike. And just final words and final thoughts on my end is, guys, just put yourself out there a little at a time, even if just even if it's one step forward day over day, and lean into the discomfort of just being yourself. And the more that you lean into the discomfort of just being yourself, it gets comfortable. And I don't think to Mike, to your point earlier, I don't think any of us are quote unquote there. You know, we all have days that we question, am I being who I want to be and who I am? But just be kind to you, and just keep being you and showing up as yourself. So
100%. And if you guys ever need anything, reach out to either of us. We're both on LinkedIn avidly,
Absolutely.
and we're always looking to find relatable people. Ah, there we go.
I have loved this conversation. Thank you so
Well,
much, Michael
Jen's
and
great
Jen.
Jen's great to listen to, so it's easy.
As is
No,
Mike.
you're both great. I loved it. It was really powerful. I was chatting in on Facebook as well, but I'm not connected, so just getting Facebook user. But I agree with you, Michael, that it's the daily work, right? For good or bad, usually for good, but that it's hard and impactful because that's part of the human experience, right? We want to be seen. We want to see. We want to be seen. We want to help others, and through that, we're actually helping ourselves. So it's changing the dynamic to fit in and moving from our comfort zones. I love the entire conversation. But let me ask you, since while everyone is kind of processing this great conversations, I have a few questions for you. Michael, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self when you were starting out on your journey?
Like, are we talking about 6 months old, like 3 days old, or are we talking about the most
2
recent
years
part of the journey?
ago, 5 years ago. Pick a younger self and go from that point.
So I'm going to say something that is probably not a great answer, but it's my answer. I wouldn't change anything. I'm exactly where I am today because of everything I've been through, good and bad. And I do not regret a single thing that's happened. Because it makes me exactly where I need to be who I am, to help people in the most effective way.
Right. I love it. Jen, to you.
Sorry, Jen.
No, you're good. And first, I just want to say, Latricia, thank you guys and Mike. This was an awesome conversation. Thank you for all you are, and you just bring so much to people. So thanks for who you are so much. I second what Michael said. I wouldn't change a darn thing. And I would tell myself to just be kind to myself. Just be kind to me throughout the journey. But aside from that, I wouldn't change a darn thing, because I agree with Mike. I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't experience every single part of life. And I love me today. So
yeah, it's the process. It's the journey, and it brings us where we are at this moment. Yeah, I agree. Oh, this was so good. What do you want the members of Corona Days Professional Development to take away from this conversation?
go for the things that you want in life. Really just take a step and just say, what do I really want? Like, we get one round, we get one journey. 40 years from now, what am I going to be happy 40 years from now with the choices I'm making? And take the chance, go for that thing you want. Whether it's a job choice or a career choice or a business choice or a life choice or a relationship, whatever it is, do the work and go for it, because you're worth it. And even if you stumble along the way, you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot. And then you'll even be stronger in going for it. Don't stay idle. Just go for the things that are at your heart.
I want every single person that watches this to go spew their proverbial life all over everybody and be vulnerable. No, we'll crash the internet.
Why not?
Right.
No, I think that people need to understand, like Jen said earlier, that they've got to start trickling this stuff out. They've got to be real. You're never going to have real connection, real intimacy, real bonds, real friendship, real anything if you don't just be real. Mm-hmm. You don't get to be happy by not being real. Like, it doesn't work that way. And again, being a real New York Giants fan doesn't make me happy either. So I don't know. Just saying, like, that's real.
That's take it all, right?
Right, like, that's real, just not good.
I thank you both so much for having this conversation with us. For those of us who participated live, Ned, Rhonda, Candace, for everyone who's going to be catching on the replay tonight and tomorrow and forever. This was really good. I thank you for asking us to confront the person in the mirror, asking us to confront ourselves and to get uncomfortable, to really enjoy and experience life. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much for having us.
All right. Thank you so much, Corona Days Professional Development Group. We'll be back at it again someday soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
I hope the awkward 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds.